Live streaming is on.
There we go. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be live in just a second. I'm just getting everything set up, sharing it to Facebook, and everything else. As you can see, I do have guests tonight. Actually, the second time in a row, I've had far more guests than I usually do on at once. I'm kind of happy about that.
We tend to move in packs.
Yes.
Yes. There we go. And that copy. Post, and then just share this two places, and we're good to go. Share to page. Original post. There's an easier. I've heard there's an easier way to do this. One of these days, I'm going to look into it. But supposedly, there's a way that you do it in one place, and it'll just post to like all of your social media. There we go. And we're all set now. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's episode of Paranormal Encyclopedia. I'm your host, Kevin Mears, demonologist, paranormal investigator, and the Paranormal Encyclopedia. Tonight, we're joined by my friends John French, Danielle Ackley-McPhail, and Jasson. I'm already blanking on your last name. I apologize.
It's Whitley.
But Whitley.
Yeah.
But as I usually do, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, because you know yourselves better than I do.
I'm Danielle Ackley-McPhail. I am an author, editor, and publisher of eSpec books who, in conjunction with Cryptid Crate, have started the cryptid series Systema Paradoxa, of which we're here to discuss the first volume by John French, with artwork by Jasson Whitley.
Go ahead, John.
Okay. I'm John L. French. I am a retired crime scene investigator, having spent over 40 years with the Baltimore City Police Crime Lab. I am now, I guess I can call myself a full-time writer because I have no other job. And I'm a writer, somewhat of an editor, and I got involved with Danielle's Cryptid project when she called me up, and actually she emailed me and a couple of other writers. The original project was going to be a 30 to 40,000 word anthology, each of us contributing a novella, and somehow it grew to a series of 35,000 word novellas to be delivered to Box Mountain once every 3 months. Apparently the cryptids that I came up with, Snallygasters and Dwayyo, caught the eye of the Box Mountain people, and they said, we want this to be the first one. So Danielle said, good news,
Get to work.
we're leading off the series. Bad news is I need the book in a month and a half.
You had more time than that.
Yeah, right. That's the story now. You know me, Danielle, the stories just keep getting better every time I tell them. As CJ said, I've got a story. I'm going with it.
Sounds good. And Jasson?
Yeah, so I have a multimedia production studio at UNC, University of North Carolina. So that's what I do now. And part of that is illustration, animation, and websites and interactive stuff. But I was also a newspaper illustrator for about 10 years, and I did a comic strip for 4 of those years, Sea Urchins. I've been a book illustrator and a comic book illustrator just, since I could draw.
You there? Sound cut out.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Jasson?
We can hear you.
Hello?
Yeah?
We can hear you.
Okay,
You're good.
I'll keep going. So, yeah,
We
I've worked
lost
with
our
Danielle
moderator.
and John on some other books, and just happy to be involved in the Cryptid Crate. It's a lot of fun to draw monsters, and so I'm having a good time.
You've done quite a few books for eSpec outside of this as well, but you're really rocking it with the System of Paradoxa illustrations. It speaks to your strengths and to your interests, and it really shows.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the most fun I've had on book illustrations in a long time. So
the first anthology a story of mine was The Dead Walk, and Jasson provided the illustrations for that volume.
Yeah, that was Die Monster Die Books.
Die Monster Die,
And Vince Sneed.
Vince Sneed.
And you illustrated the first book that eSpec Books ever published, The Society for the Preservation of C.J. Henderson.
I have a copy of that.
I didn't realize that was the first one. Yeah,
that was our very first book.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I wanted to say a quick hello. Lisa for Truth, who is one of our regular listeners, is here and alive in chat. We've got, according to the numbers on YouTube, currently 3 people watching us. So none of the rest of whom have said hello yet, but at least we do have an audience.
Hello.
I always like having an actual audience. It's like, I know I'm not just speaking into the void. Which is, I think, part of the problem early days of doing radio is it's like, I'm talking. Is anybody listening?
Well, that's how call-in radio got started.
Yep. So what you didn't? So as I understand it, this group, the
Box Mountain
LLC, does 3 different subscription boxes.
Mm-hmm.
One is the Maker box, and it's actually called Maker Box. It's for those that do 3D printing, and they give samples of high-tech filaments and or just simply colors, depending on which box those people select. And then they have Pips Mountain, which is a monthly dice calendar, and then Cryptid Crate.
As a gamer, I like the sound of dice.
And sometimes they cross over.
Oh, nice.
Because the Maker Box people end up making perfect segue. This is a 3D printed custom figurine based on Jasson's artwork.
That really turned out well too.
It did. It really did.
Really nice.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to be doing that for each of the custom boxes. So
very cool.
So the Maker Boxes did that. And then Pips Mountain, they have an actual Piptid set of dice that are all cryptids.
I just find this fascinating because I know a fair number of cryptids. As I've mentioned in chat, in emails, I've actually encountered one of the ones you have a future book about more than once. But I'd never even heard of Snarlygasters or Dwayyo.
Okay, well, neither had I. When Danielle first started talking about doing the anthology, I'm thinking, well, what can I do? I like to do things that are local.
Mm-hmm.
So just by chance, back in like April of 2019, let me grab the book.
Okay.
I had picked up a copy of it's backwards, but it's Matt Lake's Weird Maryland. And so I said, well, Weird Maryland, I'm bound to find something in there. And he had articles on Frederick County's 2 cryptids, the Snallygaster and the Dwayyo. And actually, he starts the article on the Dwayyo with Dwayyo. And I'm sure if CJ were alive today, he'd have a whole song about it. I'm going to have to work on it for when it's convention time.
Try to have a rough draft ready by Wrath of Khan too.
Well, I'll see what I can do. We can have a sing-along. I'll pass the lyrics around.
Sounds perfect.
So I started looking at them both, and I learned, because I really wasn't. I mean, I'd heard of Bigfoot, I'd heard of the Jersey Devil, but I wasn't really into cryptids as far as writing or anything like that. When I started looking them up on the internet, I found out that one, the Snallygaster was associated in Frederick County with the Prohibition era. And that also that the Snallygaster and the Dueo were held to be mortal enemies. So that gave me two important things. You could have, you said it in the Prohibition era, have one group of people using the Dueo, the other group of people using the Snallygaster, all out moonshine war, and go from there. And I figured I could get 10,000, 15,000 words out of that. And then somebody told me I needed 35,000 words out of that, and it just grew. But and to be honest, I sent an email to Danielle, and it was something like Snallygaster versus Dueo in Prohibition era. Let's call it When the Moon Shines, because I was going for the bad pun about, illegal alcohol.
Of course.
And so suddenly I had a title. Usually I get my titles at the end of the book, but and then it just kind of grew there. But that's where the whole, so I had never heard of Snallygasters or Dueo, and I'm hearing from people who, I've thought I knew of all the cryptids, but never heard of these. So hopefully it's just the curiosity that will drive the book.
I have to share with you the interesting connection here, because Matt Lake actually approached us to participate in the series. And the third partner for eSpec Books owns a bookstore in Delaware. And Matt Lake is actually living upstairs right now.
Oh, wow.
So all these little creepy vibes edging in there.
It's a small world.
Especially in fandom.
Oh, God,
yes.
But I have the proof that you were able to do it, John, so I don't want to hear it anymore.
You were the harsh taskmistress, but John was up to the challenge.
But I bring out the best in them all, so they can't complain.
Yes.
Mike says I make them cry.
Not yet, but
think he was.
But I will tell you this:
him.
the first time Danielle edited one of my stories was let's just say it was a revelation, and there's a story behind that which we won't tell.
Oh boy!
We did wind up hugging at the end, so all's well that ends well.
Although in Danielle's defense, from what I understand, isn't bringing the best out of the writer the hard way the job of a good editor?
Yep.
Yes.
I make them earn it, and I make them do it right, and in the end, they thank me.
I got my start.
Or never work with them again.
I got my start as an editor of sorts once C.J. Henderson and I became friends, because first of all, he sent me a story, and this was pre-email, pre-everything. He mailed me a story, and he said, "What do you think about it? Tell me what you think about it." And I don't want to hear, "Oh, it's a great story. I really liked it." I want to know what you liked about it. I want to know what you didn't like about it. I want to know what you found wrong with it. And so that was part of it, I would tell him what worked, what didn't. One line was, "You do realize if Teddy London does this, he's going to be electrocuted." And
I do that all the time.
I guess I have to change that. And then he found out what I did for a living, and he was very happy because now he had a police source. And I think so far he became the first author I read, who actually used 10mm pistols in his fiction. Because at the time, Baltimore had somebody running around shooting people with 10mm.
Huh.
Very easy to link his crimes up, let me tell you. But you're the only one using a particular kind of ammunition. That's a dead giveaway. That's like walking into the Capitol without a mask.
That still gets me. It's like, I don't want to go political, but for God's sakes, you have a built-in reason to wear a mask.
Well, if they were smart, we'd never catch them.
True.
You know, all you burglars out there, gloves were made for a reason.
People are funny. But no, I love the Snarlygaster in particular for two reasons. One, that name.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous. And the other is, I looked at the picture on the cover, and I'm like, wait, I thought this was about cryptids. This looked like something Lovecraft came up with.
Yeah.
But no,
well, well, Jasson did an excellent job on the portrayal of the female Snarlygaster. Because when I started reading about the legends, well, sometimes they had tentacles, sometimes they didn't have tentacle beaks, sometimes they had sharp teeth, sometimes they had one eye, sometimes they had two eyes. And you know, my degree is in biology, so I'm trying to figure out why. You know, when you write about something like this, you have to believe them. You have to take what is said as gospel. So, since some people saw them with tentacles and some people saw them without tentacles, there's either two species of cryptids, or it's sex-based. You know, it's or gender-based, I should say. And then who gets the tentacles and why do they have the tentacles? And if you really want to find out every way the tentacles are used, I suggest you read the book, because I don't think Evan's old enough to hear about it.
Even aside from whether or not we can talk about it here, I would also suggest that you guys read the book. I think this is also a wonderful time to point out there are links in the description to where people can get it. There's a link to the Amazon page, but I was thinking now might be a lovely time to mention the
discount
code that you were kind enough to give us.
Is the chat something only you can see, or does the public see it too?
Everyone will be able to see it.
Okay.
But I can type the discount code there. Let me pull it up, because I do have it in the email. Let me see. There we go. So it's PE-cryptid, all caps.
Yes.
And they're going to use that it's the very first link I put in the description specifically to make sure they'd be able to find it easily.
And I just repeated it in the chat. And that code is only good until the 20th. It's good for 2 days, specifically for this show. So
thank you for doing that, by the way. You're the first person I've had that was kind enough to offer that.
No worries. So right now we have 4 volumes that already exist. John's, which is the Snallygasters. And then 3 that I can't tell you what they are because they're going to be in boxes. But we do have limited stock, which you can order through our website, and that's it. They're not available anywhere else. They're only for pre-order.
And it's 15% off their order, correct?
Yes. And that's not just these books. Any eSpec book, it's 15% off their whole order.
And I was looking at the site earlier today. You've got some good stuff on there. I definitely recommend people check it out.
Thank you.
I'm not just saying that because you were all nice enough to come on my show and give us a discount.
We work with a lot of really good authors. Some authors that are with the big houses that are no names, and people that should be no names. James Chambers, I would publish anything that man wrote, and I've never been disappointed. He's a Bram Stoker award-winning author.
Oh, nice.
And writes a wide range of fiction, both horror, fantasy, science fiction, and it's always exemplary. We
know
have
that
things from David
where.
Sherman and Jack Campbell, and Brenda Cooper, Jody Lynn Nye, Faith Hunter. So we've been lucky to work with a lot of fantastic authors, and we put our passion into the books. So between the editing and the artwork and the packaging, so.
No, I really like that. I'm definitely a believer in. I mean, I've got nothing against the better known authors, a lot of wonderful ones, but I like you said, the authors that aren't big names but should be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of them deserve more attention than they get. So this is a way to do that.
Exactly.
And that is one of the reasons I like working with eSpec and Danielle and John, and there's just a good group of authors that are working with Danielle. So good stories, good people.
We care about what we're doing. It's not just about making money, because goodness knows you really don't.
As you say, there's easier ways to make money than writing.
But if you love writing and publishing and creating things, there's nothing better than having the freedom. I never wanted to be a publisher, but now that I am, there's so many things that I've gotten to do that I wouldn't have been able to have the creative control over. And to see it all come together. I mean, just the series alone. A mainstream publisher never would have touched this. And they likely never would have come up with the concept either, because they play things safe and we don't have to.
No.
We can be creative and we can explore those avenues that people really want to see more of, because we're not driven by the finance department and the accountants or anything like that. We use a model that is sustainable, and it may not have short-term returns in great number, but it has longevity if we use wise business sense and work within our budgets and don't draw on credit and do things in a way that we aren't going to dig ourselves into a hole. I mean, we have our sales have been basically cut down to a third of what they normally are because of the lack of conventions. But as a company, that just means that we're not, we're not hurt by it. We haven't had to cut what we're doing. It just means that we're not bringing as much in. But we also don't have the expense of the convention, so we're not putting it out either.
Right. One thing Danielle did. One thing Danielle did, as far as the cryptid series is concerned, is she connected with some of the cryptid groups on social media.
Oh, nice.
And at least in on was it the Cryptid Crate community?
Mm-hmm.
She explained what she would do and then asked them what cryptids they would like to see.
Yeah.
And I mean, big big publishers might do this, but she actually can get interactions, and she hasn't told me this. She hasn't given any indication, but I would not be a bit surprised if not one or two of those suggestions she got aren't in the works.
Well, we have so many people working on novels right now that we haven't initiated anything new because we're getting backed up.
Fair enough.
Because we can't, those that are going to be in exclusive boxes, we cannot release what the content is until after it's been in the box. And so we have novels, we have like 3 novels that we've gotten that may be waiting as much as a year before they come out, because they're slated for one of those slots. And the authors know this and they're okay with that. We have put in alternative plans, because not all of the books that appear in the Cryptid Crate are going to be in exclusive crates, because that's just not sustainable for every month.
Yeah.
So there will be a couple, up to 2 books a year, that will just be in a general crate. And those we have a little bit more leeway with the release date and all of that. We don't have to keep it hidden until the subscribers get their content.
Well, not having from talks with you and from what I've seen on your website, it's like I'm looking forward to the whole series. I want to buy all of them.
I have to assure people, anyone who looks up the series online, yes, right now it goes 1, 2, 3, 7. But that's only because we have to get the books uploaded to the printer to stage them as they're ready, or we will be production-wise backed up. But the books
Fair
are
enough.
going to be in sequential order as they release. There's more to come.
And let's face it, even I have listeners, and I know one of them is in the has been in the chat quite recently who aren't believers. But the reality is, cryptids are monsters, and monsters are just fun.
Yeah.
We are having a lot of fun with the series. And speaking of which, I meant to say this when John made his comment about what I did on the social media. Anybody listening, if you have a favorite cryptid that you would like to see, let us know. Cryptid Crate is really looking for those more unusual cryptids that you don't hear a lot about, because that's where they're getting their exclusivity and feeding a desire that isn't being met by what's already out there. So we
You
really
can find,
do.
and listeners, you can find a link to their Facebook in the description. I can also pass things along, certainly. Lisa actually just pointed out probably the best known of all cryptids, Bigfoot.
Yeah. We actually have somebody working on Bigfoot. In fact, it's James Chambers, like I mentioned. He was a big fan of Mothman, but we told him he couldn't use a big name one because they had just done Mothman.
Fair enough.
But they said if we had a good author that they could do one that was more well known, it just wouldn't go in exclusive box.
Makes sense.
So we have a Bigfoot out there.
And Bigfoot's a fun one in that he's very well known, but there's aspects of the story that aren't as well known you could play with.
Yes.
Given there's legends of something like Bigfoot literally all over the world.
In fact, in my reading about the Dueño, there was a Dueño Bigfoot connection, in that there have been reported sightings of Bigfoot in Maryland's Delmarva on the Maryland's eastern shore, and some variations are yes, it's Bigfoot, but others there are the Dueño who have been mistaken for Bigfoot, or maybe they're cousins or something like that. So, but the thing that's interesting in reading about these cryptids, because I will tell you that the Bianca Jones story I just finished, and no, it's only 7,000 words, Danielle, does involve a cryptid I hadn't heard about until I started doing readings. And
we've corrected you.
And it was like you read about you read the general thing about the cryptid, and then you start getting into the details, and again you ask yourself, why does it do this? Why at one point is it acting like this, and why at another point does it act like that? And oh boy, that reproductive cycle looks really interesting. And then you start writing the story, partly to write a good story, and secondly, it gives you a chance to explain these things. And now I have a feeling that sooner or later at a convention, probably the Frederick Comic Con, which is where the Snallygaster and the Dueño, Frederick's where they hang their hats, so to speak. I'm going to find somebody who has either read the book or is going to look at Jason's drawings and then say, no, they're nothing like that.
No doubt.
Unfortunately, the only proof of a Snallygaster's existence, it is said that a Snallygaster once took a header into a giant vat of mash that was being used to make moonshine, and it drowned, and they had the body, but because it was a monster, because it was deemed to be demonic, the good folks of the city, of that town, burnt it.
Oh, of course.
Leaving only ash. So there could have been, there could have been scientific proof of a snallygaster. They just set it on fire. And Teddy Roosevelt never did get a chance to hunt them down, which is probably a novel in itself.
He had an interest in a couple of cryptids. There's stories about him thinking about hunting Bigfoot as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, because he was the big hunter.
Yep.
Yeah, there's the title: Teddy Roosevelt and the snallygaster hunt.
Well, we were talking about it before you joined us before the show, and I think we've all decided, you're getting roped in whether you want to do it or not, that after the pandemic ends, it's going to be a road trip to Maryland, and we're going to go find us a snallygaster.
Got a better chance of finding a Dueyo, I think, but I really don't want to meet up with one of them.
I wouldn't mind finding either, to be honest. Although, yeah,
That's
neither
the
seem
fun
particularly
part.
friendly.
These cryptos are all over the place, right? So in these illustrations, I think drawn 3 of them that I've actually been like right next to where they were, or so they're going to be all over the place. But Danielle, I was thinking about your request for creatures.
Mhm.
So I'm in the Southeast. What about a giant wild boar? Maybe it's too real. I've seen the little
Yeah. I'm not sure if we would find that on a cryptid site.
ones. Ah,
that can
bummer.
be explained by science. There,
Oh, well.
I'm sure there's probably a variation that is a cryptid,
Yeah.
because there's absolutely everything out there.
Yeah.
Well, look.
Cool.
Well, there's such a
That would
thing,
be
I think,
fun.
called a dire wolf. Why not a dire boar?
Yeah.
I mean, let's face it. Cryptids started when somebody saw something and made up a story of what it is. I'm not suggesting we do it for Danielle's series, but we could write a couple stories about a cryptid that doesn't exist, and 3 or 4 years from now, you'll be
It will.
looking for them.
Well, that's the thing, and it's like that's where cryptids get interesting. Is there's a lot of overlap because somebody in the chat was asking me about, wait, we're doing cryptozoology as the subject now, and it's I've talked about cryptozoology on my show before, and it intersects with the paranormal, with the spiritual in a number of ways. There are things that cryptid hunters, as it were, cryptozoologists call cryptids that people like myself might call spirits. One of the most famous examples being, and one of my favorite cryptids actually, is black-eyed kids.
Mm-hmm.
And you have these kids that show up at doorsteps with the black eyes and act absolutely terrifying and then just disappear. And you'll see cryptid hunters talk about it, but you'll also see paranormal investigators talk about it. Oh, okay. The person thought it was about the story of the moon. No, the name of the book is As the Moon Shines.
When the moon shines.
When the Moon Shines, excuse me. Which is also, it's a great secret. We talked about it already. Morgenstern, in that the book is about Prohibition era, so it's a play on the whole moonshine. It's a great book. I definitely would. I just was able to finish it this afternoon, a little bit before the show. I really enjoyed it. Particularly because I hadn't heard of the cryptids before, so it was something new for me.
Yeah.
And I wanted to give positive feedback because you asked me about it in the email, that the little encyclopedia entries you put at the end were very useful to me because it's like, what's a snallygaster? Oh, okay.
I had a different encyclopedia entry, but Danielle said I had to tell the truth.
Oh, boy.
And as a fiction writer, that's kind of hard to do.
I don't know. I've always thought, in many ways, fiction writers tell the most truth.
Kevin, you mentioned how the world of cryptozoology kind of sometimes intersects with the world of the paranormal. And in doing reading on certain kinds of cryptid, I came across the Slender Man.
Yeah.
Which is both a cryptid and a paranormal entity.
Oh, the Slender Man's really interesting. Because here's the other angle to that some of my friends in the paranormal community and I have been talking about. We know that the Slender Man was a deliberately created hoax. It started as an internet contest to create creepy old-time photographs. You could trace it all down and see where it began. But there are some eyewitness accounts and things that almost suggest people are starting to experience this. There's an idea you find in both Western magic, where they call it thought form or an egregore, or in Eastern mysticism where they call it a tulpa, where thought and the power of belief can actually give something form.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen people, I've at least started to wonder if this Slender Man might be one of these, or for that matter, if a spirit just thought the story was funny as hell and decided to
let's mess with their heads.
Yeah, the unfortunate reality, as Lisa Truth pointed out, is Slender Man gets a lot less funny when you realize that two girls did actually murder one of their friends over that particular creepypasta / urban legend. And obviously, the show does not promote murder in any way. That's horrible.
But you hit a good point where that if the principle that if enough of people believe in something, they basically create it. It comes up with a life of their own.
Mm-hmm.
And I just finished listening to Neil Gaiman's The Sandman audiobook, which is
a wonderful audiobook.
Hell of a lot creepier than the graphic novels, because the graphic novels you kind of look at the picture and for maybe a couple minutes and then you move on, but when they're describing the scene,
Mm-hmm.
that description can go 20 minutes and you're stuck in that diner or you're stuck in that house with John Constantine. And it is not for the squeamish, but one of the stories in there is Dream of 1,000 Cats.
Oh, yes.
And which is a remarkable piece that you either have read the comic or read the graphic novel or listen to the audiobook about what was became what is, and how what is might become something else if enough people wish it so and dream it so.
Mm-hmm.
Or enough creatures wish it so and dream it so.
Mm-hmm.
That's even scarier.
It's a reality.
Yeah, particularly since cats are involved.
Oh, yeah. And it's like, cats are so adorable, but you look at them sometimes and it's like, they would eat the human species if they were able.
Well, what was that? I don't know if you've seen The Big Bang Theory. In one of the early episodes, Sheldon is rejected by it would have to be I think the third or the fourth season.
Mm-hmm.
Sheldon and Amy have a big breakup, and he responds by adopting like 20 cats.
Oh, yes.
And Leonard says, when you die, they're going to eat you. And he says, Leonard, you don't have to sell me on cats. And if I may interject some real life into that,
Please
I've
do.
been on scenes where people have passed away unattended, alone, with just their pets. The pets get hungry. They got to eat something. And apparently at a point, they stopped smelling like their masters. They stopped smelling, the master stopped smelling like what the pets expect them to do and just become lunch meat.
Although I get the impression that happens a lot faster for cats than, say, dogs.
Mm.
Not that it doesn't happen for dogs, but...
Yeah.
That's how Dana Scully got Queequeg.
Uh,
Oh, okay.
In the X-Files, that one wasn't a cryptid tale, but Queequeg dies in a cryptid tale, so that's kind of funny.
Well, I've never adopted a pet from a crime scene, but I know several crime lab technicians who appeared on the scene, and the pet's owner was no longer, for whatever reason, the pet's owner was no longer able to take care of the pet, and the pet was adopted by that particular crime lab tech. I did stop at McDonald's once on a follow-up to a case. Had to take some pictures of the inside. And this beautiful Irish setter comes up to me and basically gives me the dog look that says, "Take me home. I want to be your dog." And if I hadn't just gotten a dog, I would have had an Irish.
That's adorable. I love it. Certainly, all the experiences I've had going out on paranormal cases, it's like most of the animals I've run into, I don't really want to take home.
Don't follow me.
A few of them weren't quite, there was one of the more remarkable memories is driving home from doing the radio show I did back in the day, actually, and it looked a lot like a bat. How it got into my car with all four windows closed, and how it got back out with all four windows closed and without me seeing it, is a really interesting series of questions. But just this big fluttering thing in my face that looked like a big black bat.
Yeah.
Or
we got a puppy, during COVID. It's a golden retriever / border collie mix. Anyway,
Ooh, nice
so I've been
mix.
looking at this puppy while I'm drawing the Dueo. So there's a lot of that puppy. My daughter looked at it and she said, "That's Beetle," because the dog is Beetle. So, yeah, it is.
Okay. I got a cat story. And Danielle will appreciate this. I was on a burglary once, and they came in through the front door. I forget how they came in, but I said goodbye to the guy. Usually they don't walk me to the door because they're busy washing the fingerprint ink off their hands because I took their elimination prints. So I said, I'll just see myself out. So I opened the door and in ran a cat. It ran up the stairs and is sitting very cat-like at the top of the stairs looking down at me. So I yelled to the owner of the house, "Your cat came home." He yells back, "I don't have a cat." To which I responded, "You do now," and left.
Oh, God, I remember a house I did in Delaware. So this house was trippy on so many levels. But there's this room right off of the entrance. It's about the size of a closet. And when we first come in, one of the investigators has a EMF / thermometer in his head that just starts going crazy in front of the door. Now, on the other side of this door was the family's collection of weird objects and their pets. Mm. On the weird objects front were a pair of Ouija boards without the planchettes and a human skull that they had bought off of eBay. On the pets front, you had several terrariums with boa constrictors and pythons. And then you had the one that was a pair of white chinchillas. And I remember me and every other investigator looking at that and going, it's like, you do realize the day one of these snakes gets out of their cage, that's going to be lunch.
I was thinking it already was lunch.
No,
just had
it was a pet. I don't know why they kept it in the same room.
Well, why did Granny keep Tweety and Sylvester in the same room?
To torture the cat.
Tweety could defend. I'm sorry, Tweety, male or female? I never was able to figure that one out.
I have no idea.
Male.
I thought it was male, or he.
Yeah.
Was male. I don't know.
Don't gender assume birds.
Yeah. For those of you who are A, Looney Tunes fans, and B, have HBO Max, they have quite a number of Looney Tunes.
Nice.
I found 2 of the 3 duck season, rabbit season cartoons. I went to them first because those are the funniest ones they've ever made.
And we all love the duck season, rabbit season. Now I'm just thinking of the one was Back in Action where Daffy quits, and Bugs goes, "Duck season," and just gets a shotgun blast to the face because there's nobody there to save her.
They have done like 11 or 12 new Looney Tunes, mostly Porky and Daffy, Bugs, and a few Roadrunners.
How does
Well,
it relate to the original?
They've taken Elmer's and Yosemite's guns away, but that doesn't really stop anything. It's still violently funny. Maybe we should pitch Warner Brothers on a Dwayo versus Snallygaster series of cartoons.
No, I think it's awesome. Let's do this. And you've got an obvious crossover because Whitley is clearly avatar of the coyote deity from every Native American culture in the United States, virtually.
Yeah, his not so bright younger cousin.
Depends on which version of coyote. Some of them aren't all that bright.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody out there want to do cartoons about Snallygaster Dwayo? I'll write them. Jasson will draw them, and we'll split the profits.
Animated.
Animated, yes.
Show the picture, Danielle. Show the pictures again so people know what we're talking about.
That is the Snallygaster. And have to actually open the book for the Dwayo.
I think I might have I still have that one. Hang on.
Now,
That's the black and white version.
Yeah.
Still gorgeous artwork.
Definitely.
Oh yes.
Back it up a little bit.
Back it up, Jasson. Yeah. I say it. I had, I didn't really have a clear idea in my mind what a Dwayo looked like, but when I saw Jason's drawing, I went, "That's what a Dwayo looks like." Now, let me point out that the links for Cryptid Crate and for ST Cryptid Crate are on the list, right? Right, Kevin?
Should be. I just copy pasted everything you guys gave me.
Okay.
Into the description.
Now the Cryptid Crate for January 2021, which is the Snallygaster exclusive, not only comes with the book and with it's a decal based on Jason's drawing of a Snallygaster, and there's the figure of the Snallygaster. It comes with a pin and a glow-in-the-dark Snallygaster T-shirt based on traditional drawings.
Fantastic.
And the links on how to get these are in the notes. You can get them probably straight through Cryptid Crate, or you can get it through their SD account.
And interestingly enough, when they saw the artwork for this book ahead of time, they were actually doing a Dogman themed book. And so they took the artwork from the Dwayo and made a decal of that too.
Oh, fantastic.
It may still be available on their website. I don't know. They always do a little bit extra, but I don't know how much.
I was going to say that whole idea of the Dogman is so iconic in folklore. I mean, you have the various Dogman stories in the United States, the Dwayo. Obviously, you have a huge link to werewolf stories all over Europe. And I think there's some legends in, I want to say, Ireland, of that half man, half dog creature that aren't shapeshifters. They're actually just dogmen.
Most of the cryptids have regional variations that are similar to other things around the world, and they just have different names. So you get a lot of overlap like that.
Something somebody brought up in chat that I thought was an interesting point is their thing about cryptid hunters is that so much it focuses so much on the United States. And it's like there are stories of creatures like this in Europe. It's just people, I don't know, maybe just because people have been around so much longer, most of them have passed into the point where people just see them as myth and legend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I,
Those areas have been around for so much longer that those regional tales have weight and history to them. Whereas what we encounter here is more the urban legend feel.
I do reference at least one European cryptid. I think it's when the moon
Italian,
shines.
right?
Italian, yeah, because one of the characters is of Italian descent, and as he's reflecting on the local cryptids, he thinks back to something that he had heard back in, well, his family had told him about back in Italy.
And you actually got points with the reviewer for that because it was from a region that their family was actually from.
Well, I read that review. At least she likes something.
Yeah,
I saw that review as well, and it is the interesting thing of it's like, and one of the other things I find interesting though with cryptids is like, no, there are stories like this in other places. They just go back further, and people aren't quite as eager to go looking for dragons or the Minotaur as Bigfoot because I don't think anybody's claimed to see a Minotaur in probably a few thousand years. You can find people in the last 20 to 30 years that claim to have seen Bigfoot.
yeah.
For that matter, you can find people, at least in some places in the world, the U.S. and I believe even some parts of Asia, that still claim to have seen dragons.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the cryptids people have looked for in other parts of the world, we stopped talking about them as cryptids because they found something.
Mm-hmm.
For hundreds of years. Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think the cryptid that's even more famous than Bigfoot is the abominable snowman.
Yes, Yeti.
Yeah, no one's seen one Yeti.
Well, that's the interesting.
You're in timeout, John.
The Yeti is so similar in so many ways to Bigfoot, down to the fact that we have this modern idea of Bigfoot as this very benevolent forest giant, but there are older stories of him, eating children and being a figure of black magic and things like that.
He's become more like a green man.
Yeah,
without the foliage.
And you see a similar evolution, for lack of a better word, in the way that people see Yeti. In the old stories of Yeti, they're creatures of magic and terror, and you don't mess with them. And now they're kind of just seen as a Bigfoot. Although, funny enough, if you read early 19th century accounts, they talk about this very Bigfoot-like creature that tourists and explorers who had gone to Africa were describing. And it's tall, it can walk on its hind legs, it has very human-like hands and human-like feet, very intelligent-looking eyes, and people dismissed it. But of course, nowadays, just about everybody in the world accepts that mountain gorillas are a thing. It's just how things were worded. I mean, for heck's sakes, the first English zoologist to be handed an actual dead platypus, not just a story, but the actual corpse of a platypus, was absolutely positive it was a hoax. He thought it was just like the Fiji mermaid, where it was just sewn together from a bunch of creatures.
I always thought that the platypus came about on the fifth and a half day of creation, and God is going to some of his worker angels saying, "All right, we need a few more species. What do we got? Got some spare parts, boss, but just give them to me. Put them together. Send it to Australia. Nobody's doing this."
It's like they could explain a lot of the species in Australia.
Yeah, God put the platypus together based on the parts he had left over.
I've always there's two explanations I've seen for the platypus other than that, though I have to admit I like that one. One of which is it's God's practical joke on biologists. He knew that we were going to develop this theory of evolution and everything was going to fit very neatly within it. So he wanted to throw a bit of a curveball just to make them go, wait, what? And the other one is the platypus is what happened when God got stoned. If I ever find a prophet of God, I'll have to ask which answer is the right one. I like all three of them.
Well, lead a good life, and when you get upstairs, you can ask.
That would be the other option, but I wanted to answer sooner. It's like,
And you mentioned James Chambers a while back. Early in my writing career, but mostly based on what I did for a living and not what I wrote as a hobby. James asked me to be consulting editor on a series of young adult books called Criminal Investigation. And of course, one of them was Unsolved Mysteries. And of course, that included Jack the Ripper. And I'm blanking on the name of the man who wrote it, but he's a prominent ripperologist. And as an aside, Michael Newton, I believe, yes.
okay.
As an aside, not part of the editing, I asked him, who did he think Jack the Ripper was? And he wrote back saying, I think that at the end of everything, when all the ripperologists gather in heaven and ask who Jack the Ripper was, and we hear the name, we're all going to turn to each other and say, who?
Yeah, I think that's probably about right. Although there's one other, I think the most likely possible answer to who Jack the Ripper really was is the body doesn't matter. It's actually an eternal spirit known as Red Jack that's like the spirit of murder. Which is a reference for all of my Star Trek fans.
Yes, I was thinking Star Trek. Kevin, you've read The Magic of Simon Tombs?
Yes. What a great book.
So thank you. You know my theory of Jack the Ripper.
I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but yes.
One with the woman who was doing the signing.
Oh, yeah.
Featuring dead authors.
Yes, I remember. I liked that story.
Oh, I know why, because he was in it.
Well, this is a good story, but yes.
Yes. That's the idea for that I had a long time ago, and just finally found a way to use it. Danielle will tell you that's what authors do. They tuck ideas away in the dusty attic that's their mind. Every once in a while,
everywhere.
Bring it out.
I remember hearing a story of Edgar Allan Poe from when I was a kid, that when he couldn't sleep, he'd go for walks in his house, and he'd write notes on the wall so he wouldn't forget the ideas for stories he had.
Wow.
My thing is, I come up with titles that sound like this title would make a great story, and there's still one or two I'm still looking for the story of.
Mm-hmm.
The one I did use and I really liked was the last Catholic altar boy. Oh, Last of the Latin altar boys. That was in my Matthew Grace collection. Because I am the last of the Latin altar boys. I trained as an altar boy, believe it or not, and I did 1 year with the Tridentine Latin Mass, and then they switched everything up to English. So, so I remember bits and pieces of my church Latin. That's use it whenever I can.
I was never an altar boy, I have to say. Although I did go to I was Catholic for my teenage years. But my problem is I have the ideas for stories, and then I have great ideas, and I sit down and try to write them and get lost in the weeds.
That's the whole idea. It's the process and not the conclusion. I'm sure Danielle has too, and possibly Jasson has started drawing something that didn't turn out the way he thought it was going to. But I have written stories, and the story, first of all, with the characters take over, and the stories go different ways. The Bianca Jones story I just finished did not end the way I originally thought it was, because the characters kept insisting on doing things themselves.
My mom's usually trying to get a start.
I actually started a story for CJ Henderson probably had to be at least 7 or 8 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I only ever got the beginning, like maybe a page and a half. And I literally just finished the story to submit to another collection. And I never would have known it was going to go the way that it did.
The problem was you should have just told CJ your idea, and he
would have wrote it.
He would have told you the whole story, and all you would have had to do was write it down.
I've had a notion for a while of doing a novel, maybe even a series of novels. Let's see how the first one goes. Loosely based in a version of the Judeo-Christian apocalypse, because I want to explore my own thoughts on that.
Mm-hmm.
But told from the perspective of a werewolf detective.